Anyone there? Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you now. We were muted.
Perfect. Sounds like we're muted again.
We're gonna be on mute for a couple more minutes.
Is Dave there?
Yes.
.501.
So who did we decide for the meeting?
Typically the chair might delegate that out to
Somebody in person?
somebody in person.
So,
Since he's chair coming in remotely.
Okay.
Donnie, Caleb is here too, if you wanted him to start the meeting.
well, I was gonna, if Dave Wallner was already on the joint board of review, I would allow Dave to chair the meeting if that's all right with everyone.
Yes.
I'll call the meeting to order. Roll call of members.
Rodney Hawkins with Somerset School District.
Neil Klein, Northwood Tech College.
Dave Granville, Somerset School District.
Caleb Garn, village trustee.
Dave Wallner, member at large.
Donnie Kern, president.
I'm sorry, do we have a county member? So we had school district,
Tech College.
Tech College, sorry, 2 folks from school district? Yeah. Okay, great. That gives us a quorum to move forward then.
And Jana Stewart. Jessica Flair, didn't see you. You were hiding behind Mr. Ellers here.
So is this all present then?
No.
Okay, all present. Item number 3, so we have appointments as needed. A public member,
Yep, so you're gonna be representing the village, right?
correct,
We have 3 folks from the village who are here. We've got Donnie, you're a
public
member,
member,
public member, perfect. So we'll vote to affirm you, and you were also the public member last year,
correct,
great, and we don't need any other action.
correct, okay. Donnie, you'll be the chairperson when you're in town?
That's correct. I just wasn't able to make this meeting due to the timing of me getting appointed as president.
Okay. So then I was just pro temp as of today,
Correct.
okay? Number 4, item number 4, review responsibilities of joint review board.
All right. Great, and this is usually where I come in, I can feel free to jump in. My name is Josh Lowe, I'm from Ellers, we are the village's municipal financial advisor. So I apologize for not having printed materials in front of you, I left them on my desk as I was driving out, I forgot to stuff them in my bag, even though I printed them up earlier this morning. So I'll be able to share my screen in just a minute, once I get permission to share it, and I think Jessica, I can get that over to you, there should be a share request coming soon. But for now, I can talk about the responsibilities of the joint review board. So there are 2, and since we're covering 2 really separate topics for today. One is going to be the review of the annual reports, which are for any community in Wisconsin that has an open tax agreement district. Every year, you're required to do 2 things. One is to present and send in the PE 300 annual reports. It's about a 3 or 4 page document that reflects all the activity that happened in 2024. It shows your revenue, the expenses, and anything else that happened in each tax agreement district. So that's one. That has to be done by July 1st every year. The second thing is to have this meeting, which is really just a status update on each tax agreement district. What I'll be presenting is really a summation of the last year's results from each district, but then we put that into a cash flow moving forward, because usually we feel that the best thing for folks to see is not just what happened a year ago. So the 2024 results really reflect the year of 2024. So now we are at the year end of 2025. So that data is actually pretty rusty at this point. So usually what we do is flip that into a cash flow that projects ongoing revenues and expenses for each district. That's what we find to be most helpful. So I'll jump to that in just a minute. But then we're also getting together for the creation, for you guys to hear for the first time, of tax agreement district number 7. So there are 2 main responsibilities for the joint review board when it comes to the creation of a new district. One, it's to understand the legal findings that we're proposing in each new district. So this is going to be a mixed use district, so that there are a couple things that are involved there. One is to note that there is at least 50% of the total land area for the district that we're talking about. And I'll go through all this in the PowerPoint just to walk you through where we are. That at least 50% of the total land that is being proposed will have at least 2 of the 3 main land use categories. So residential, commercial, and industrial. 2 of those 3 uses need to make up at least 50% of the area of the district, and that's what makes a mixed use district. And the second is the but-for test, which to say without this district and without these tools that we're proposing, none of the future development would occur. So it's really the understanding of those 2 pieces of the main responsibilities for the review board. In addition to understanding how these cash flows work and knowing that once we establish a new tax increment district, you're not going to be made worse off in the long run by the creation of it, okay? And I'll get into the details all through this once we get into the TID 7 portion of it. So first, we're gonna focus on the annual report, and then we're gonna jump into the TID 7 piece. Okay? Did you get that share request for me to?
I think I saw her,
Yeah, you did.
I saw her click it, so I think you should be good to go.
Okay, great. We're not seeing that. Okay, so let's try that again.
There it is.
Great success.
Black magic is working.
Get this out of the way.
That's fine.
All right, Donnie, can you hear me okay online? Thumbs up.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great, so let's go ahead and do the annual meeting piece. All right, so this is really the main stuff that I talked about at the beginning. We presented and sent to you via email the annual reports. I don't consider them to be especially valuable for the purposes of these. So we have those, we have the annual audited financial statements, which are made available. And so from here on out, we're gonna look at the maps of each district and think about the cash flow, okay? All right, so starting on TID 3, this is the city's oldest district, as you might guess. 1 and 2 are already closed. This one was created in 2005 as a blight elimination district. Just a few years ago, we amended it again to add new territory and new projects. And I think one thing we did was acquire some property at that time. The expenditure period for this district ends in 2007. So we're really getting to the closeout period of this district. So there's only 2 more years to really think through if there's any other improvements or anything else that we want to do in terms of spending new money. Of course, for the rest of the time, the district's open, new projects, when I say new project, new development can occur in the district, which will generate new revenue. But the window for the village to spend new money on infrastructure or development incentives or anything like that is coming to a close. So that should wrap up in 2007. So the map that you see on the screen there shows the existing, this is from the 2023 amendment that we did. So everything in blue was the existing district at the time. And what was in red are the additional parcels that we brought into the district. Because we wanted to be able to jump across Main Street to be able to pick up some additional parcels in acquired property there. So that was the purpose of the amendment just a few years ago. All right, so this is the cash flow for the district. You're gonna see a variation of this for our next couple of districts and certainly for TID 7 as well. And it's good that I'm driving so that I can zoom in at different spots. So this box up here in the top right, financial statement, this is basically the summary of, sorry, I've got the little icons. There we go. You can see that. The fund balance of -92,653. That's really the summary of the PE 300 ending in year 2024, right? So that's kind of our baseline that we're starting in, so that from there on out, we can show all the rest of the development that we need to occur in this district. Sorry. Nope. All right. So over here on the left-hand side, all of our cash flows really work reading from left to right. So that the way that revenues start coming in for tax increment districts is anything that is constructed in the first year gets valued the year after that, which starts actually turning into property tax revenue the subsequent year. So that first line over there, you can see revenue year, construction year 2023, right where my cursor is, will get valued in the summer of 2024. And that's the first year, 2025, this year that we're getting revenue, right? So we've got 2024 starting here, 92,000. And then we've got very little value has it created in the district since it's been created since 2007. That's good. Which is actually not too surprising for a lot of downtown blight districts, right? So a blight elimination district, especially in a place like downtown Somerset, the point is to rehabilitate properties so that we can have higher taxable value in the future. But certainly in downtown, a lot of things are built out. So sometimes it takes a long time for things to develop, which is the case in Somerset. That's why there's only been 169,000 in new value created since 2007. And that's what that number there, that 169,900 shows for last year's 2024 value into 25, right? When you multiply that by last year's tax rate, $13.93, you get to the revenue coming into the district of being just $2,300. Okay, so TID three has not been very successful to date, right? Any questions so far on how to read the cash flow and the information that I'm sending? I read these all the time, every day, so it's very easy for me to just keep talking. So feel free to tell me to pump the brakes, slow down a little bit. It's totally fine, right? So a few years ago, up until 2023, there were almost no expenses attributed to this district at all because it hasn't really grown much, right? Since then, at that time, we took out actually some new debt for that project that time to do some street improvements in the district. So that's where the expenses for that 2023 bond will come from. So you can see now that we've got 2,300 in revenue compared to only 12,000 in expenses for that district, plus some admin expenses. So we've got a slight deficit for the next few years. Until a few years from now, we're gonna start getting hopefully new revenue from new development in TID three. Bob, and I know that we talked a little bit about the new development that's expected to occur this year, constructed this year. How are things going for new development in TID three downtown?
That's been completed.
Yeah, that's been completed, right? So that's the 2.3 million in new value that we have there. So that's still a preliminary estimate. So again, where we get this 2.3 million, it's for construction year 2025. That's gonna be valued next summer, which should be turning into new revenue in 2027. So right now, that's just a preliminary estimate. In the next few months, as we turn into January, the assessor is going to figure out what the value of that new improvement is going to be. That'll turn into actual value in the summer. That's when the new numbers get published that formulate these reports, right? So then that turns into actual new revenue for the following year, 2027. So at that point, we're expecting the tax increment value of the district to go up to 2.4 million. And when you multiply that by the tax rate, now we're gonna get revenue up to 35,000 every year. So that's how we're really starting to generate more positive cash flow in this district. So that goes on for the next several years till we get to the last year of this district in 2033, where we've got this balloon payment due on those 2023 bonds, which is going to still be in a deficit. So right now, we need some good additional development to happen in this district to make sure that turns positive for the long term. So the village has made some investments here that we're hoping to reap the benefits for in the future. So that gets us to the last year of the existing district in 2033. There are options, though, for a district that is not closing at a positive balance to extend the life of the district even longer to recoup additional revenues. So I would expect in the next several years, if we do not get additional revenues, to bring this body back together to start looking at how we can extend this district for 2 years, for several more years to get additional revenue. So there are two methods to do that. One, under state statute, the state gives the ability to any district that is showing a negative balance at the end of its life to get the standard extension. So that gives you 3 additional years to collect revenue. For a district created in this time period, anything before 2013, that's when Act 145 of Wisconsin actually occurred. And this is to allow an additional 3 years of an extension due to the tech college mill rate changes that happened at that time. So when that happened, the mill rates of tech colleges all throughout the state went down. So the state's way of allowing tax increment districts to make themselves whole, since the mill rates went down at that time, was to give them more years to collect revenue since the districts were already open. So almost any district that was open during that time was negatively impacted by that legislation that occurred. So I think that by the time we get to, probably not at 2033, but in the next 5 or so years, we'll get a better picture of how much development is happening in the district and be able to update these cash flows, and we'll see if we need extensions at that time. Okay. That's pretty much the summary of this cash flow. Any other questions before we jump up to the next district?
My understanding is that any negative balance at the end, resolving that short of extensions or anything like that rests with Somerset
That's right.
in this example, correct?
Yep, that will be a liability of the village. The flip side of that is if it ends with a positive, the village doesn't keep every dollar. The village distributes everything else back out to the other taxing jurisdictions based on their size of the apportion levy. So in this case, if it's in the negative, the risk is the village's. Any benefit with a positive surplus is shared equally, not equally, proportionally. All right, so let's jump up to TID 5. So TID 5 was created in 2020 as a mix. Oh, one other note I should say about TID 3. Since this is a blight elimination district, it would actually be eligible to receive monies from other mixed use districts. So blight elimination district can be a recipient of transferred funds from other successful districts, which is not the case in mixed use districts, which TID 5 is. So TID 5 in 2020 was set up as a mixed use district. And was then projected to include residential, commercial, and recreational uses. So to date, a lot of the stuff north of the freeway has started to build out, right? You can see 64 coming right through there. So we do have some success north of the freeway. It's south of the freeway that we're really still hoping to turn into new development. So here's a TID 5 cash flow, and this one is bigger, so I'm just gonna zoom in a little bit more. You can see first off that we're again working from a deficit in 2024 due to some of the investments that the village has already made in the district. All right. Okay. So as of last year, I guess let's go from the current revenue year, 2025. There was $802,000 in new value increment. When I say increment, what that really means is how much the district has grown since it was created. So we're 5 years into it on this one, and so far it's only created 802,000. So for last year, this coming year, the district itself was generating $11,000, right? And I'll get into the source of these advances in just a minute. But to come up with a current value, the district has and the city has done a couple of different financings that are shown here. 2023 bonds are related to infrastructure and some road improvements for the district. This state trust fund loan from 2024, this is for property acquisition to even be able to build on some of those spaces that are north of the freeway. And Bob, feel free to fact check me on any of these things that I'm saying. And the Growing Wings development incentive, this was pledged for the Growing Wings nursing, or is a skilled nursing facility, something along those lines, right? Okay, thank you. This is pledged for them in response to their creation of the value. And that is what's driving this 2.4 million, right? So this 2.4 million in new value, which is starting to create new revenue for this year, is directly related to the Growing Wings incentives here, right? Okay. So we've got an existing fund balance deficit coming from the previous year, right? So how are we making payments on all this debt for the time being? What we're anticipating doing is bringing money from advancing it from the general fund. That's what this column does here for the next few years as we're waiting for new development to occur in this district, which is a pretty large opportunity for Somerset. Where does the money from the advance come? It actually comes from, very indirectly, from contributions from land acquisitions in TID 6, which we'll get to in a minute. So when TID 6 was done, when the property was purchased, the money didn't actually have to go to TID 6 because it wasn't created yet. So the money that the developers who are now building TID 6, Pinevale, gave to the city $742,500 for that property. It actually went to the general fund, okay? That was very lucky for us that the new district wasn't open yet. So since that's the case, we can use that money as kind of a bank to solve these deficits in the various other districts that we have and not put that on to the taxpayer. So that's where this $107,808 comes from. So this money gets paid, will be received from that, and it'll get recirculated over time as this district becomes more successful and then starts having a positive cash flow over time. So that's how that's gonna get paid back. And that's how we have these expenses here shown in this middle section being paid by the incremental revenue generated by the district itself, and then by the advance from the general fund. So then as over time, this builds out higher and higher and higher. When we created the district in 2020, we had estimated that about 25 million would be able to be generated. Again, going back to this concept, right? If most of this is starting to build out now, we still have all of this that we hope to generate new development for residential, commercial, and industrial purposes into the future. So that's really the goal for this district. Still has a lot of potential there. We're waiting for that to get activated. Right. So with our current expenses, we definitely need some of that new development to fill in here in these future years, so that we end up having these negatives turn into a positive. Of course, there's only so much that the village is going to be able to advance from the general fund to sop up some of those deficits in the short term. We really need that development to come in so that the general fund can get paid back. Okay. Any other questions on 5?
One question on 5.
Sure.
Wasn't there a revenue from sale of land in 5? And I'm looking for that. I thought that there was like $200,000 in land, from the sale of land for the current, development going on up there.
Yeah, that might have been for the new CapVest development. I would certainly add that here. So the way that that would look, if we had that, assume that, let's say this was 307 instead of 107, this would be 318. So then this cube balance right here would go down. But then we'd still have the long term here. But let me make a note of that, Darby. That's a great point.
Yeah, I thought there was that sale of that land that it was gonna offset some of that debt that we were gonna pay, at least in that first year.
Great. Let me make sure that that's added here as well.
Have there been good conversations with folks about this one? It's a good deficit to have to work through, so I'm just curious if it's something that folks are talking about and are interested in.
If things are going well.
A lot going on.
Good.
Josh, what does the GO stand for?
General obligation.
Got it.
All right, so TID 6 was created just 2 years ago as a mixed-use district, and it's a much different story for this one. This district really takes up a wide variety of area in Somerset, but most of the activity is happening right up here, and that was the main reason why we created it a few years ago for residential uses. All right, so as I mentioned, this is where the Pinevale development is occurring, right on the northern edge of the village. And it's been going great so far. So far, just since in the last 2 years, they've created 60 homes to date. And the full concept for 135 homes in total is projected to be completed by 2027. So things are going very, very well. As of 2024, it was a break-even year, so that's pretty easy to describe. So I'm just gonna zoom in on the value increment. So just last year, we got a partial value of 664,000, which really only generating a little bit of revenue. We were doing a similar strategy with some of those advances to pay the early costs related to this district. This value that's bold here, 7,308,000, that's related to all the construction that happened in 2024 to get us up to there. So at that point, as of today, I don't see too many districts that within 2 years have already generated $7 million in incremental value. So that's going fantastically from our perspective. So next year for 2026, they'll pull in 106,000 in revenue for the district. There are 2 main expense types for this district. One is the per home incentive for CapVest to build. This was the village's concept to get them to kind of light a fire and making sure that they were very active. For every home that they construct and every time they obtain a new certificate of occupancy, they get $5,500 per home. So those are some of the main expenses that we've had in the first 2 years since development has already started so strongly there. The next one are the general obligation notes we took out earlier this year to help CapVest, and this is the village's contribution to the infrastructure, the roads and site grading that went into the development of TID 6. So the village paid for a portion of the infrastructure so that the developer could do all the vertical building on it for all the homes, right? So those are the 2 main expenses. That's almost everything that is related to Capstone. And as the future goes on, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for the village to execute new projects in and around TID 6 that are not related to Capstone, going back to the map that I showed a few minutes ago, because the district itself is drawn in a way that covers so much territory in the village that we're able to, over time, we've got so much positive balance here, looking to the right-hand column, that this is probably going to be able to pay for plenty of other options and projects in and around Somerset. And this is also why I mentioned that TID 3 as a blight elimination district could be set up to receive positive cash balances from a district that's doing really well, like TID 6. So between this one and TID 3, I feel pretty good about the success of those two districts.
Josh, are we
Not-
restricted to the amount that we could put into the blight elimination district from TID 6, or is there a way we could, chew that up in its whole? I guess, is there any restrictions to putting something into the blight restricted district from other districts?
No, you would only want to do it to the point where you're solving your deficit for
Got
any costs that are executed.
Okay, thank you.
So, going back to that district, I think there was, 233,000 or something like that at the final year in 2033. That's just my memory from what I was talking about it 10 minutes ago. That's obviously a drop in the bucket for TID 6. So you can see how we've got very strong annual balance positives from every year going on out, which only accumulates to a very large cumulative balance for this new district. So I think that this would be a really valuable tool to be able to share that with TID 3 over time. And we're also paying back the advance. This advance is getting paid back here very quickly since everything that's going on here is going on so well for TID 6. So this is what I'm showing for new value coming out of Pinevale over the next few years until they're done with their concept there. So everything for TID 6 is going very well. Any other questions on the TID 6 cash flow? All right, that pretty much wraps up the annual meeting portion for those cash flows. So that's all that I've got to say on reviewing the cash flows and status of those districts.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay. Item number 6 is approved resolution acknowledging filing of the annual reports in compliance with the annual meeting requirements.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the resolution. I'm just pulling it up right now. Resolution acknowledging filing of the annual reports of compliance with the annual meeting requirements for the Village of Somerset.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any comments? Seeing none. Take a roll vote.
Yep.
Is that aye?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect, thank you. Pull up one more document there. All right, we're ready to move on to the TID 7 portion.
Review, discussion, draft project plan.
All right, great. Let me go ahead and pull up this document and I'll walk you through it. Bear with me, great, just one second.
Josh, was that the draft documents that were sent out by
Yes,
earlier? Okay,
there should be a presentation, I'm trying to share.
Sure.
I'm great luck with so far. There we go. Okay, great. Everyone can see that. Let's see if I can get that full screen. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're gonna focus our attention on the new opportunity that we have for TID 7. All right, so it would have actually been helpful if I did this presentation first, because there's a lot more background and tax requirements. Usually I want to get the annual meeting out of the way first, but I've got some good, just big picture. kind of slide. So, I got right into the nitty gritty of what we're trying to do and the numbers for each previous district, but really, the whole purpose of taxing and refinancing is figuring out a discrete set of resources and funding sources to pay for economic development to transform a site that wouldn't exist normally, right? That's really the main thing here. Without tax and refinancing, the only other tool that communities really have are their regular tax base and their general fund, which obviously are accounted for in a lot of other ways. Everyone, especially under levy limits, is strapped to find funding sources for, all the other general operations of community. So tax and refinancing really captures all the revenue and growth, the increment, which I've been talking about, to provide a discrete funding source to pay for those projects to make the development happen anyway. Again, going back to that but-for test that I mentioned at the top. Okay. So the picture here really is the site. This is straight up from Google Maps. As you go up from 35, look east, we've got that open parcel of land owned by the Newman family that currently uses it for farming. That is the site, right? Okay. So just some quick background here. We've talked about the increment and everything that we're getting to generate new revenue in each district. That's what's really shown here in the purple. Okay. Go to pause for just a second. Okay, great.
We're still in review board. We're still in the review board. Oh. Usually, real fast, right? Take a seat for 45 minutes.
Okay. So for the cash flows that we're describing, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit, compared to the last ones, we're a little bit higher level. The baseline property value, the district that we're trying to establish, right, has very low current value. It's just agriculture, it's not developed parcels, right? But it is contributing some property value, property taxes. Right now, the value of all those parcels is around $440,000, I think, something like that. So that is, of course, creating property tax values that makes the budget for all of our overlying taxing jurisdictions, right? From that, the village gets a share, the tech college gets a share, county and school district all get a piece of that 440,000, right? So that's the same as it is today. And after we create this district, that amount actually doesn't change, right? So that will still be getting the same share for all the taxing jurisdictions between now and when the district closes. However, after we start building on that parcel and the district is created and we get that new increment, just like we did for TIDS 3, 5, and 6 we just talked about, the new increment that gets created above that baseline, the 440, that will all get captured by the village until the tax increment district closes in 2047, right? So that's what we're using to pay for all the infrastructure and improvements and incentives that were pledged for each of those other districts. When the district closes in 2047, then every other property tax dollar doesn't go to the village anymore. That's when it gets distributed back out to the other taxing jurisdictions. So thinking about TID 6 that we just looked at, once Capstone has built out everything, right now it's maxed out at 44 million or something like that. All that is currently being captured by the village to pay for those costs. But once the districts close, that 44 million is going to go back and be split back to the taxing jurisdictions as part of your property tax collections for that. So that's why we think of this as being, no one's being made worse off by in the short term, but in the long term, rather than just being held down here with your property baseline value after the district's created, you're much better off in the long term to get this much larger tax base. Right. So that's really how we think about taxing the districts and that but-for test. So if you don't think that any of these projects would happen or the development would happen without this district, then we wouldn't need this tool to begin with. But since it's been vacant for so long, what we're saying is that we need these tools in order to create new development on it. Okay, so this is the current map for TID 6, TID 7. TID 6 is actually this down here, right? So we're really trying to think of this as like, almost like a phase 2, right? Since the development that we're putting into that has obviously been shown to be going very well, probably likely within the next 5 years, all the residential opportunities for TID 6 might have been built out already. So we're trying to think about this as the long-term next phase where the village might want to grow after that. So this is a really big all-encompassing plan. And a lot of it is being driven by the property owner, right? This is the Newman family that owns those parcels up there. They would like to sell this very quickly by the end of this calendar year. So that's why we're bringing this up really towards the end. So Bob and I have been talking about this off and on for a couple of years now. And it's been on a low simmer up until like 6 weeks ago, got turned on to a raging boil. That's where we are now. So that's kind of the way that we're looking at it. Really, the overarching goals here to promote economic development, job creation, housing opportunities, and expand the tax base of the village. Oh, and this is when I talked a few minutes ago about the required finding, one of the key responsibilities of the joint review board to understand that not less of the 50% of the area within the district is suitable for mixed use development. So we're definitely going to be able to cover that here because almost everything is going to go, except for this parcel, I'll show this in a minute. Almost all of this is going to be for residential, commercial, and industrial, probably focusing on these two. Donnie, I'm talking about parcels 3, 6, and 7. Also, the right-hand side is going to be residential, left-hand side is going to be commercial, industrial, and hopefully some park space. That would be the ideal goal. We don't have a firm concept yet. Of course, we're not even talking to a developer specifically and saying, like with Capstone a minute ago, they were coming to us and saying, we want to build 135 homes here. That's not really where we are right now. We're doing this district knowing that we've got a large open section of land still to be determined. So I've worked on a lot of different district creations and kind of like on one end, we're reacting to a very specific developer who's come to the village with the concept. We're moving forward. This is one of the tools that are necessary to get it going. This is kind of on, maybe not fully on the other end of really working at a concept. But it's much more speculative than some of those other ones that I do that are very specific, where you've got a developer saying, you know, we want to build multifamily residential, mix in with some commercial retail, maybe some warehousing or something like that. And we know all the streets and utilities that need to go into this place. That's not really what we're trying to do here. It's much higher level, I think, than that. But I've certainly done plenty of both kinds. Any questions really on the concept? Bob, I don't know if there's anything you want to fill in at this point.
Yeah, unless there's questions.
Do they have a buyer lined up? Is that the
We-
driving?
We have several inquiries.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious from simmer to boil, what changed, so.
Well, the simmer to boil is really because of the seller of the property wants to do it now.
Yeah.
So if the village controls that the first step is to control parcel 2 before someone else can purchase it then from the village, similar like what Capstone did a few years ago for TID 6. Okay,
So the village is gonna be the one acquiring it from the Newmans.
Correct.
Okay.
so the main expenses that we're looking at so far and anticipated projects for this district are property acquisition to get it from the Newmans, public infrastructure to build it out once we get a developer online. As I mentioned, that park or athletic complex development, and then development incentives. So this is one of the least specific maps that I've ever had to create, because we don't know where some of those pieces are gonna go. I can't say exactly where the streets are gonna go or where, even the athletic complex development probably should have even been in the other bubble there, because it's still to be determined by the village. How much residential is built here, or how much the industrial or commercial goes is still to be determined. Although I will say that the village will be capped to having the amount of residential be less than 35% of the total. And that's another legal finding. Because a mixed use district cannot have more than 35% of it be dedicated to newly platted residential. And since this is all agricultural, it will all be newly platted. And no, I'm not gonna bother getting into the specifics on what the DOR considers to be newly platted. Will spin most people's heads around, so very unspecific.
So quick question.
Yeah,
The clarification here, when you got on TID 7 anticipated projects, you got 4 phases of 1.5, so that would be 6 million. 3 phases of 3 million for infrastructure, that'd be 9 million. 2 million for athletic complex and 2 million for development incentives. Is that right?
right.
Okay.
So
I
a lot
just wanted to clarify that I'm reading that correctly, as the 4 phases are actually So we got a grand total of investment or anticipated cost of, for 19 million.
Yep, and that's all shown also in the full project plan that was emailed. There's a couple tables that speak to all that. So in this presentation, rather than giving you a 40-page document and asking you to flip around to different spots, I'm really trying to condense this to the highlights. Probably the thing that we know the most concretely is the cost of phase one of the property acquisition, which I think is, that's how we got to the 1.5 million. That's what we want to close on for this year. Everything else is purely speculative, going on what we think is needed in working somewhat with the engineers and based on experience in other districts. So the 3 million for public infrastructure, that's a best guess. Athletic complex development, best guess. And similarly with incentives, we're not working with someone specifically who has come to and asked for $1 million of development incentives yet. But whenever we do these, it's important to list out to give you a mental image of what would be needed. And then, but to give you a toolkit with which to work from. So when I put these up here, think of this as more of like a framework and a toolkit rather than the specifics of being held to only those amounts. You know, this is going to be a 20-year district. So if someone comes to you with a concept of saying, hey, we want to build some light manufacturing here, you know, we need some utility extensions. You know, you're not going to be capped at, well, we have to do it for $3 million because that's what was in the project plan. All of these are seen as, you know, really giving you a toolkit which to work from later. So I always think of this toolkit's a great example. You know, at my house, I've got a toolkit, as you guys probably do too, and in it has hammers, nails, screws, a drill, all those kind of things. It doesn't commit me to doing any specific improvement at my house, but I have this toolkit. So when invariably something breaks and I need to do it, I can lean right onto that. It's already purchased, already authorized, set and ready to go. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Set the village up for tools that they can use at their disposal in the future once they get those concepts and people come to them and say, here's what we want to do in Somerset.
Josh, what are the rules around expanding the TID?
So this TID, you can do 4 boundary amendments to a TID throughout the life of the district. That's one thing we should know. So whenever we're going to do an expansion, you want to be very judicious about your opportunities to do it. You don't want to do it willy-nilly because you don't want to eat those up. I would also say that I've never worked in a community that got up to that limit, and I don't even think Sean has either, and he's been here for 35 years. This other guy I worked with, named Sean Wentz, who's my counterpart. So that's one thing. Also, you of course need to have it within your control. So these parcels have been annexed into the village at this point. That's another thing you need to know. When you do the expansions, you need to make sure that it fits within the legal findings. So the 35% test for for multifamily residential. So if right now we're basically like 33%, so really getting up to the highest, almost to the limit. If you were going to add, say, you know, this parcel up here, it would not be able to be residential.
For clarification, that's 33% by land volume, not dollar value?
Yes,
Okay.
land area. Yeah. So it couldn't be residential. It would have to be something else, either commercial, industrial, or anything else you wanted it to be.
And would an expansion have to be geographically adjacent?
Yes, somewhere else. So let's say you wanted to do this one here. This is a kind of funny area. Can you even see that?
No.
Cursor over there. All right, I can just point to it. Oh, there we go. It's a little slow. All right. So Donna, you're not going to benefit from me pointing, but if you wanted to build on this one right here, you would have to also bring in this one. Like if someone said, we only want to build up this parcel or this one here,
So it
you
has
basically have to
be
connect
connected.
other parcels to be able to. So
Yeah.
they can continue this. Okay, so here's the development forecast. And I'll zoom in on this so you guys can see a little bit better. So the creation really thinks about construction starting 2 years from now in 2027. So the idea is, you know, at the end of this year, we're going to acquire that first phase. More development, as you know, Bob mentioned, he's getting a lot of activity coming to him to build out. So we're not saying that something needs to happen in 2027. We're anticipating that happen the year after that. So this value added column here is showing a series of build outs over time, whether that's a combination of residential, commercial, and industrial, all sharing this. Going back to that map, think about that, it's, you know, about 250 acres, so there's quite a bit of available land to be able to build on there. So that's why I think it can really capture a lot of the economic activity that we're gonna do. If you're thinking about this as like phase two of, the next phase of residential development, thinking that TID 6 is almost built out, there's quite a bit of new home value and residential demand that's being pent up right now, that could be, split there. Also, Bob's getting a lot of calls for other commercial and industrial development, so that's why we feel pretty good about over the life of this district for 20 years, growing pretty substantially. So right now, we're projecting it to be about 107 million, sorry, that's million with an M, built out over time. So when you multiply that by the village's current tax rate of $14.56 per thousand, it will generate around 19 million in total revenue. That's this number right here for the district over time. Okay. Any questions on the revenue generation for this project? All right.
Does that,
Okay.
what, the one question I have on that now, does that include the money that we are putting into that? Or is that just the revenue we're taking back out? I know it's the same for infrastructure, but do we have, is there a point in there where we have like the dollars and cents that we're getting for dealer incentive, incentives and stuff like that?
That'll be on the cash flow on the next page. This is how much revenue is gonna come in based on the development that is going to grow in the district.
Gotcha. Okay. Getting ahead of myself, sorry.
Don, you're always one step ahead of me every time. Okay, all right, so here's the cash flow, and I'm definitely gonna have to zoom around on this one. But this section here in orange, this first column right here, tax increments, borrows directly from that previous slide at 19 million. This side for property acquisition revenue, this is what the village would then acquire, revenue that they would receive from selling the property to a potential investor or a developer, right? So, well, think about those phases. The village is going to acquire property and spend $1.5 million and take out a loan for that. Then they will get reimbursed by selling the parcels to a developer. They'll receive that money. That will go back into the TID. Okay, so that's kind of the way we're thinking about these cash flows. So each section here that you see, each one of these columns here for projected expenditures is related to debt for the infrastructure, property acquisition, or development incentives that I talked about a few slides ago. So each one of these columns shows the projected expenditures for each one of those debt issuances or sets of expenditures, right? Donnie, here's where you were asking the expenses related to development incentives. So
Yep.
we've got the one here, phase one, and the second one in, 2034, right? So here's where we're going back to those balances. Remember, on the last few cash flows, we're talking about reading left to right. So here's how the expenses come in. You're seeing a few. This is an interesting cash flow because we've got those very large expenses and revenues related to the property acquisition coming in and out. So that's why you're seeing large negative deficits in any given year, because we're going to bring in revenue from selling, money's gonna go out because we're buying land, and then the next year it's gonna come back in because we're selling it to a developer. So that's why you're seeing these big jumps year over year. But the most important thing that I want to show with you is this cumulative balance column. So think about that, the last several cash flows we looked at, this is really like the savings account for a tax increment district. The fact is that we're never going into the negative, and this column is always what's the most important thing in assessing the fiscal health of a tax increment district, so that when your savings account is never outside of the first few years in the negative, this means you're always in financially stable. And so what we're looking at, based on the current assumptions on revenue generation and pace of development, compared with these expenses, is that it would take until the last year of this district being in existence to be able to pay for all of its costs, which is really pretty common. And I usually try to increase the amount of expenses that I put into a project plan to make sure that this number is as low as possible, to give the district and the village as many options, as many tools in the toolkit as would be available. I usually try and think of as comprehensively as I can. Remember, going back to my toolkit metaphor, I want to make sure that they've got all the nails, screws, screwdrivers, circular saws, everything they need to, so they actually don't have to come back later and amend the plan again and ask for new projects and do all those things. I try to think of it as comprehensive as I can on the first shot. So that's why this district spends down the way that it does and gets to the final year of a cumulative balance pretty low. One other thing, the last thing I really want to hammer home here is really this last bullet point, which says that all projects are subject to authorization by the village board at the time of implementation. The main takeaway here is to say that just because we're adopting a project plan, not even tonight, this is the board's gonna adopt a final project plan in 2 weeks, that's when their meeting is. That doesn't authorize any of these borrowings. The village still has to do another process, just like they always do, anytime they wanna issue debt. The project plan doesn't commit anyone to doing anything. I've worked on plenty of project plans that have sat on a shelf for the first 5 years where they didn't spend a single dollar. So the village board is always the final backstop for issuing any debt, taking on any expenses. Any other questions on the cash flow? Donnie, any thoughts? All right, I'm just gonna jump to the timeline. This is my last slide. So thank you for coming tonight. We've got the initial joint review board meeting. You guys will be called on again in a couple of weeks to hear this one more time. I think that the way that the state has thought about this is splitting up into 2 meetings. So today is the first time you hear this. Over the next several weeks, you'll have time to deliberate on this, bring it back to headquarters, talk about it with your coworkers or your higher ups and figure out, is this really a good idea for you? And think it through it in that way. Remember, going back to those primary responsibilities, does this work for your own institution, right? Right after this meeting, we're gonna have a meeting with the plan commission. Oh, that's one thing to say. You guys don't need to take any action tonight to approve this, right? We'll bring you back for that later date. So the plan commission does need to approve tonight a resolution recommending approval to the village board. So that's gonna happen after this meeting. On December 16th, in just a few weeks, I'll be back here to present this again to the village board to get the village board's approval. That is really, that will be the date that the DOR considers the district to be created, right? After that, at least 2 weeks after that, and a date to be determined, so that's the last thing we're gonna do tonight, is you guys will come back together after you've had time to think about it to vote on the final TID 7 project plan, okay? So it might go through some additional changes between now and when the village board hears it. It doesn't usually happen that way, but we're certainly open to feedback on this project plan between now and then, okay?
Just to clarify, we're voting on the plan, not the creation of the TID district itself.
Oh, it's actually the same thing.
What's your time frame you're looking at on something like that? Is it gonna be at before the end of the year or first part of next year?
First part of next year. So a great next step would be to look at our calendars and see if there's a similar time that we wanted to do this. If this time slot works for you, maybe like mid-January.
I am out until I'm on vacation, whoops. Until the 9th of January.
What about the 13th? Does that work for anybody?
I think that I'm on a village board in the village board in Osceola. We have a meeting that night. I
Okay.
could do that. I could do the 20th if we're looking at Tuesdays, but
20th is our board meeting, isn't it?
Not available on the 20th.
We could also do this one fully remote. So this is usually a pretty quick meeting. Unless there are major changes between now and then, I can usually close these in like 15 minutes, answer any brief questions, especially if there haven't been any updates. So usually
what time did you do it on you're talking the 13th, what time would it be? 5?
any time that works for you guys will work for me. I'll make whatever happen.
If it
So
were virtual, I could do 5 on the 13th.
I can do 13.
perfect. 5 o'clock on the evening.
5 o'clock on the 13th?
Zoom style.
All right, works for me. That's
And
my
we'll
last real page there's my name, contact information, if you guys wanna follow me, talk it through, any questions, right there.
That being said, move to adjourn.
Motion is there, second? Caleb,
Second.
first and the second heard, meeting is over. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Where at? That was your.